Welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Bethany Global
Leads.
University Lead Venture. How's everyone doing? Hopefully you guys had an awesome weekend. We had a fantastic weekend here at Bethany Global University where we graduated 52 people.
We did. That's
Yeah,
fantastic.
it's awesome.
Well, 92 of them include certificates and associates.
That's true.
And then 52 bachelor's degrees.
There's some lead media people who also graduated, right?
Almost 100 students total, man.
So it was an awesome weekend here at Bethany Global University, so we're excited. For those of you who are tuning in, my name is Ken, and this guy is
Ken as well.
We got two Kens on Facebook Live today and Instagram Live, so we're excited to talk to you guys. As some of you know, we have been having a Facebook Live conversation the last several weeks on just discerning God's will for your life. We've been hitting on several points. We've been talking about your shape. We've been talking about why God made us, how did he make us, all these different things. And it's been fun hearing some of the comments. Kenny, what have you been enjoying about this series so far?
Yeah, it's good, even in my own life, as I've wrestled through things and I'm kind of ending a season of life. I've been working on my graduate degree, so I'll be done in a few months. And I've been thinking about, hey, man, what does the next 5, 10, 20 years of my life look like, looking at some of my goals. So even the last few weeks, it's been good for me to think about applying this to my life. It's easy sometimes we know things, but then we just forget to actually apply them to our own lives, which is sort of silly, but I know many of us are guilty of that. So it's been valuable for me.
Yeah, it's been awesome. So it's been fun for me to see the comments, to hear the feedback from people here at Bethany or alumni or friends that we've had that are checking this stuff out. Mm-hmm. So we're excited. Behind the camera, we have Dan Sanchez, our marketing director. Everybody say hi to Dan. Woo! He's just breaking all the focuses of the camera. Thanks, Dan. We're excited to have you guys. And today's topic is a fun one. It's while we're talking about discerning God's will, we're going to talk about this topic on how to make good decisions. Kenny, why do you think we should even have this discussion of how to make good decisions when we're talking about God's will?
I think there's a lot of people that make really bad decisions. And it and I know I've made a lot of bad decisions in my life.
No.
And it ends up being really harmful.
Yeah.
You end up missing out on things. You end up suffering pain that you otherwise didn't have to suffer, consequences of those, relationships, really missing out on the all the things that God has. I think there's a lot of people that don't use wisdom when making decisions, and we hope to give you some thoughts and perspectives to help avoid that.
Yeah. And at the same time, there will be times that you may have two good decisions in front of you, and you're just trying to figure out, like, man, which one do I pick? And you're kind of like, I don't know, and you get paralyzed with indecision.
Praise God, we get a chance. Sometimes we're making decisions between two righteous things rather than a wicked thing. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. So trying to figure out, okay, how do we then help people make decisions? I know when I was younger, it was really hard for me to make good decisions. And that's probably because I didn't have a framework on how to make good decisions. Yeah. So Kenny, how about you start us off and just tell these people on Facebook and Instagram, like, how do you make good decisions?
Yeah, we're going to give you a couple questions to ask or some things to do. And the first thing I think you need to ask yourself is, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
If you really don't want to do something, it is unlikely that is the primary thing God is calling you to do. And we're talking about macro level. And what I'm not saying is that there are times in life you don't want to do things you know you ought to do that are good for you. I didn't want to wake up this morning at 6 a.m. and go to the gym and run 2 miles on the treadmill. But I knew it was good for me, so I did it. Even though I didn't feel like it. I didn't want to do it in the moment. I wanted to keep sleeping. I didn't want to say no to the extra bowl of ice cream, we were hanging out a couple days ago. So there are moments where we want to do things we know are bad for us. Yeah. But generally speaking, I'm thinking more macro level. When you're making a determination, what do you really want to do? So I'll give you a real example. Some of you watching this might be determining what school to go to, what college to go to. Maybe some of you have applied to Bethany Global University, and we would love to have you be a part of it. Maybe some of you have also applied to another great school. Let's say you've applied to Wheaton College, great college in Illinois, and you're thinking about, do I want to go to Wheaton or do I want to go to Bethany Global University? And you're just like, what do you want to do? Which one do you really desire more? Those could be both really good options. But you say, I want to actually live in Minnesota because I've heard the summers and the falls of Minnesota are way more beautiful than they are in Chicago. And I can tell you, they are true. That's true. So maybe that's what you want to do. Or maybe you're like, I just really want to attend a college that's a little smaller. Okay, then BGU would be a great example, a great option. Or if I really want to be at a school that's going to teach me how to do XYZ major, and Wheaton offers it, but BGU doesn't. Okay, well, you want to do that. Well, go do that thing then. It's okay. It's not wrong to go ask yourself, what do I want to be doing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know some students who came to BGU and then they realized, man, there's a major at some other school. Wheaton is a good example. They're like, oh, Wheaton has what I would really want to do. So I'm like, go do that. Why are we going to stop you from the thing that your heart wants to do? And it goes back to the shape thing. The second question that we like to think about when it comes to helping you make good decisions is just like, who are you talking to? And specifically, like, are you talking to older, wiser people? I know lots of times we like talking to our friends and we're trying to get good feedback from our friends. But sometimes our friends are fun to hang out with, but they might not be the wisest people to ask questions, especially when it comes to major decisions about life, right? And trying to figure out, like, should I marry this person? Should I go to this school? You don't know. So talking to older, wiser people who can ask you the hard questions and could ask you the questions that you might not be thinking about because you have certain blind spots is extremely important to you as you're going through this process. So that also implies that you got to have mentorship in your life. It could be your youth pastor. It could be your parents. It could be your senior pastors, elders at a church, spiritual leaders at a private Christian school that you're going to. Find people that can help you make good decisions.
Yeah, I mean, people, personally, in my own life, I'm almost 37, but I talk to two of the pastors at my church regularly. There's some guys back in Florida I'm friends with that are in their 50s that I really trust. Friends back home, I have a really great friend of mine who's just a few years older than me. He's a pastor in Houston, Jim. I talk to him regularly. I'm always going to people who are a little bit older, maybe who've done a little more than me, maybe are much older and are wiser. They're going to give me good advice. If you're in your youth and young adult years, if you're 18, 19, 20, people your age are great, but they're not going to be your best source of wisdom. I'd encourage you to talk to people much older than you who have kind of accomplished some things in life. They're going to be able to give you a life perspective that your friends won't be able to give you.
Yeah, and it's all about experience. Those older people have experience and be like, hey, if you do this, this might happen.
Right.
So, yeah. What's the third one, man?
Yeah, I think a really practical thing you can do is make a pros and cons list. I was literally doing this. I was living in Orlando, Florida. I was a part of a local church. Ken and some guys here tried to recruit me to come live in Minnesota. And I made a pros and cons list. And so I think it's really valuable. Here are the good things about about leaving Florida and moving to Minnesota. Here are the bad things about leaving Florida and moving to Minnesota, right? I made a pros, and then I made a pros to staying in Florida and the negatives to leaving Florida, right? I made a pros and cons to each decision. And I'd encourage everyone to do that. I even do this on a smaller level sometimes, even if it's a small decision. And I'm looking at the pros and cons. And I think sometimes when you look at them, maybe you show your friends and your older, wiser mentors, and you show them, sometimes it's helpful to see it. And then one of the things I frequently ask myself in relation to that is the idea of, what am I afraid to miss out on? Kind of the old FOMO disease, afraid of missing out. If you're a 7 on the Enneagram, like I am, that's one of the biggest things you're driven by, your fear of missing out. What I mean by is, when you make a list of things, the cons will sometimes show you something you're not going to be able to do.
Yeah.
And are you really, really saddened by that? So I'll give you a practical example for me. I'm originally from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and there's always been part of me that's wondered, man, I'd like to go back home. I miss my family sometimes. I've got 11 nieces and nephews. I've got, all my siblings are having kids, and sometimes it's nice to be around them. And so if I stay in Minnesota for a long period of time, if I live here for the next 20 years doing ministry, well, on the cons list would be missing out on being close to my family. And you're from New York originally, right? Your wife's originally from Illinois, so you guys are not close to family regularly. You guys get so it's a similar con staying here. So you have to look at those cons and say, am I okay with this? Am I okay if I live the rest of my life away from my family? And as sad as that is, and to some extent, I think the Lord has given me a peace that I'm okay with only seeing my family a few times a year. For some people, that would just be unacceptable. They could not live away from their family. And in that case, then maybe for you, living close to your family or being able to live in a way that you could be close to your family regularly would be a good decision. So when you make that pros and cons list, ask yourself, what are the things I have to have? What are the things I absolutely cannot miss out on? And allow that to begin to shape your thinking about your decision.
And I'll add to that, when it comes to adding, the pros and cons list, is look at how long of a season you're gonna be giving up something. When we've talked about family, for some of you, you're like, well, I'm going to give up my family for a short season. It's just for my college years, my 3 to 4 years of going to college. Can you do that? Okay, yes, I can do that. It's going to be hard, but I can do that. Versus us, we were it's been 12 years now since I've been back to New York City. Philly, it's been 15, 18, so you're just like, wow, okay, that's a longer decision, and we've had to weigh that. So realize that even as you make your pros and cons list, there's some time duration that you have to set up. The next question that I like to ask myself is, what type of community are you going to have? You know,
That's a
and
good
I
one.
think this is super important because sometimes we get really excited about this next adventure that we want to do. Some of you might have an entrepreneur type gifting or a skill set, and you're like, this is what I want to go do. And all of a sudden you go do it, but you realize, like, I have no community and no support. Especially for us, like we've mentioned, we don't have any family. Like my spiritual family, my church body, the people that I've become really good friends with here at Bethany, they are my family. Like without this community, I probably wouldn't be here much longer. So realizing that you need community wherever you go is super important. If you look at scriptures, it's always talking about you doing mission with a community. So are you going to have a good community? Is Bethany Global University or Lead, would this be a community that you want to be a part of?
Yeah.
Or is it not? And sometimes that's okay. You might be like, yeah, you guys are cool, but I don't really jive with you. That's okay. Go find a community that you feel like, I can thrive here and I want to be around the whole time.
Yeah, that was a big important one. I was moving from Florida to Minnesota, and one of the first things I did before I sort of yes to the job is I sent an email to a pastor at a local church here in Minneapolis, a city's church, and I talked to him beforehand. Before I came here, I actually flew up and I had lunch with him, and I said, hey, let me talk about, I didn't want to come here and church hop and try to find the church. I wanted to come here knowing there was a healthy church. And I would have said no to the job if I wasn't confident in that. And so that was a big part of it. So I think the community is a huge part.
Cool. Yeah. What's the next question, Kenny?
Next one, I'm trying to look at my notes here. And so I know some of you guys think we just memorize all these because we're that smart.
We are.
But not so much.
Logistical sense.
Well, doesn't make logistical sense, right? Sometimes things just logistically don't make sense. This kind of ties in with the pros and cons list to some extent. But sometimes it just doesn't make sense. The logistics or the circumstances just will make it seem like that's a dumb idea. Don't do that. Yeah. So, for example, if you're watching this and you're really serious about going to the mission field, praise God, we want you to go to the mission field. Not enough people are going to the mission field. So let's say you're like, I really want to go to the mission field. Now, let's say you decide to go to college, and the college you're going to go to is $40,000 a year, and you're going to rack up $120,000 in debt by the time you graduate. Well, it's going to be really, really hard to go to the mission field if you have $120,000 in student loan debt. It will be virtually impossible. So that probably logistically doesn't make sense. If you feel called to go to the mission field, if God is calling you to go overseas and serve Him in that regard, it doesn't make sense for you to go be a part of a school that's going to make you do a bunch of debt. Now, there may be moments where if you're going to go to a particular school and you're going to get a particular career or a degree that's going to help you make $500,000 a year, and you're going to be able to give away a lot of money to the gospel, and okay, then maybe racking up $120,000 in debt, maybe that makes sense. Yeah. But rare, right? Yeah. In most cases, though, it makes more sense for you to go to a school like a Bethany Global University, where we are really aggressive about driving the cost down, so that you can graduate with little or no debt. And most of our students do graduate with little or no debt, and therefore that makes the most logistical sense. Sometimes it just doesn't make logistical sense for you to make a decision.
Yeah.
I think about one of our colleagues here, director of services. Him and his wife have been praying about purchasing a home in the area, and he's saying it doesn't make sense for you to buy a home that's only 3 bedrooms in this particular neighborhood, because we're thinking about having more kids. We're not going to be able to grow into that home. So it makes more sense for us to go buy a little bit of a bigger home in a neighborhood that's a little bit cheaper, so we can kind of grow into the home. It just sort of the logistics. Like me and my wife want to have more kids. It makes more sense for us to buy this home over here that maybe is in a neighborhood that's a little bit cheaper, but it's a little bit bigger. And that seems like a silly way to think about it to some extent, but it logistically would make more sense to not have to move again in 2 or 3 years. Yeah. It's sort of helpful that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the next question after that would be, what's going to sanctify you? And I know that wherever you go, you're going to be sanctified. But one of the things that you have to keep in mind is, like, the Lord is going to sanctify you in a good way, whether you're in a good place or in a bad place. Hopefully, you'd want to be in a good place, right? You want to go to somewhere like, man, I know that I'm going to grow more in Christ in this location. Whether that's head knowledge and experiential knowledge, and also just becoming more like Christ. You want to make sure you're like, I know that this place, that's where I'm going to grow more to be like Him. And I think sometimes we don't think that. I think sometimes we try to find the location that's like more comforting, more at ease. You're like, oh my gosh, it's exciting. I would love to go to a mission school in Hawaii. Why would I want to do it in Minnesota? But it's like, no, you know what? That's sanctifying. I'm telling you guys, I lived in Texas for 7 years before I moved to Minnesota, and I had to seriously ask myself, do I want to move to Minnesota? Like, it's cold. but like I sensed the calling that the Lord wanted me to be here, and it's like it's going to sanctify me. There are times in the winter where I was like, why am I here? This is frustrating, and I just had to remember James chapter 1 verse 2, consider pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds. That might have been a silly trial, but for me at that time, I was like, okay.
Minnesota cold is not a silly trial, brother.
Yeah, right? It's like
a real trial.
But I'm like, okay, this is what the Lord wants from me. He wants me to mobilize and train people. I'm going to do this.
Yeah, it's a really great way to think about it. I literally just had a conversation with someone who just graduated from the Lead Venture program from our media track, and she's kind of wrestling about whether she should go home. She's from Pennsylvania, or she should stay here in our ministry internship. And we were having lunch one day, and I asked her seriously. I said, hey, are you going to be able to get the things that you would get here? You're going to get mentorship, discipleship, advanced media training. You're going to get more opportunities to serve. You know what you're going to get here. Are you going to get that back home? And if she was honest, said, no, there's the community I'm going to have, and the sanctification I'm going to have, the opportunities I'm going to have, I'm going to get are not nearly as great back home if I'm here. I'm going to be way more sanctified. Jesus is always molding us and challenging us no matter where we are. But sometimes we're in a certain location where that gets exponentially, that grows exponentially.
Yeah.
And that gets cultivated. And she knows she's kind of in this really unique season of life where she's going to be way more sanctified staying here as a ministry intern than if she goes back home. And as hard as it was for her to decide to stay here away from family for another year, she's coming back in the fall to be a ministry intern.
That's awesome.
For that exact reason. She said, this is going to sanctify me more. I don't want to be in Minnesota. I don't like living in Minnesota. I don't want to be away from my family. I don't really want to have another year where I'm not working an outside job, not making money.
Yeah.
But ultimately, this is going to sanctify me. This is what I have to do.
Yeah.
And I thought that's a brilliant way to make that decision.
We got one more question, Kenny, and it's all about long-term goals. So,
yeah, I think it's kind of a lot of things we've already said tied to this. But ask yourself, what are my long-term goals, and what decision can I make right now that helps map to that? Right, kind of going back to this example about going overseas. If your long-term goal is to go overseas, then what maps to that? Does going to a state school help you get there, or does coming to BGU help you get there? It's going to sound like I'm just trying to push BGU. I'm not just trying to tell you, but honestly, BGU is a great choice if you want to go overseas.
Yeah.
Right.
If you want to become a doctor, this is not a good spot for you.
Right. Maybe coming to Lead Venture for 1 year, right, to learn Bible leadership, to be discipled, and then going off to college to get a medical degree is the best choice for someone who wants to be a doctor, right? Yeah. So that's why we created Lead Venture. It's a 2-semester program. So you have to ask yourself, what helps me get to my long-term goals the most? And if you're making a decision that doesn't actually propel you toward a long-term goal, then you need to probably rethink whether or not that makes the most sense for you to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, those are 7 questions that we had for all of you guys. I don't know if there's anyone over there who's given us a comment or has any questions. Dan is giving me the no. We've been talking to ourselves pretty much this whole time, but it's awesome. But for those of you who are going to watch this later, hopefully you are blessed. Here's the deal. If you guys are ever interested in missions, come check out BGU. It's a 4-year program. You get a double major in intercultural studies and Bible and theology, 2 years on campus, 16 months overseas. You finish your degree here. And if you're like, you know what, BGU is not the place, but Lead would be something I'm interested in. It's our gap year program where you do 1 semester where you get leadership, discipleship, learn about the Word of God, and then you do the other semester overseas. You get both of best worlds.
Yeah.
The best of both worlds.
That's
there we
close
go.
enough.
Close enough. Got it. Right. And then from there, if you're ever interested, you can jump right into BGU. So I'm super excited to see where the Lord leads you guys. Hopefully it'll be here. And if not, go find an awesome college that we'd be happily blessing you guys. Next week, we're going to talk about battles to your calling. Whenever you decide to make a decision, there's always going to be some hard, difficult things that come along your way because the enemy is not just going to let you do it. There's going to be some difficulties, so that's what we're going to talk about next week.
I look forward to that.
Yeah, sweet. Hope you have a great day, and God bless, guys.